Hey, what's up? My name's Eric. Welcome to My Endurance Life, and you are in for a treat because we had no other than the legend himself, Jeff Garmire, come and speak with the My Endurance Life team. And he's going to talk about 4 pillars, these skill sets that he's developed through his thru hiking, backpacking, and setting multiple FKTs through over a decade of thru hiking and backpacking experience that has turned into trail running. He is a 4-time finisher of the Cocodona 250, multiple 100-mile races, 50Ks. He's also a coach and host of the Free Outside podcast, so I encourage you to check that out because it's a really neat listen. So after you watch this video all the way to the end, because there's some nuggets that he drops in there, go and check out his podcast, The Free Outside. But right now, with no further ado, let's get into the call with Jeff. So I invited Jeff on here because he started hiking and thru hiking first and then got into ultra running, where a lot of people come, especially in our community, through My Endurance Life and everybody that I'm meeting through coaching and stuff like that, either comes from like a road background or is just, with ultra running and exploding, just go straight to the trails and kind of sidestep the hiking part where um, I love hiking. And one of the aspirations that my daughter has is to do the Pacific Crest Trail. And so it's like, it's something hiking has not, I use it for my racing and for training, but it's not something that I've never really concentrated a lot of time on until she found interest in it. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like, this is like, I enjoy being outside. The reason I just never got into hiking is because it takes so long to get places. I like to run to get there. So, um, just I wanted to hear from Jeff what any advantages and disadvantages that he has through his hiking experiences that has helped him turn into an ultra runner. Because if you follow him on Instagram, he just got his 1,000-mile Cocodona belt buckle, but he's
Yeah.
completed the Cocodona 250 4 times. So and he's going for his fifth in a couple of weeks. So
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It'll be big. Yeah. So, yeah, we can get started here. So I kind of set it up in a few different sections of kind of the backpacking hiking side because I still use a lot of through hiking or just mostly backpacking stuff or longer days out there for a lot of the skill set that is involved in ultra running. And so I started out when I was 20 years old. I quit college and then backpacked the Pacific Crest Trail and just learned that I really like the outdoors and vowed to somehow make it a part of my life. And now it's a huge part. But from there, I did what's called the Calendar Year Triple Crown, where I did the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail in the same year, which was like 8,000 miles. And then 2 years later, I did the Great Western Loop, which was 7,000 miles, which circles around up through California, Oregon, Washington, takes a right turn through Idaho, Montana, and then heads south through Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, and then connects back to the start of the loop by going through Arizona and right back to where it started on the Pacific Crest Trail. So, and that's what kind of led me into FKTs, so records on the different trails. And because I was out there and I was putting in bigger mileage and keeping up with people. And then I tried a couple different small challenges, regional challenges that kind of opened my eyes to like these longer efforts, especially whether it's ultra running or FKTs, they're not so different from through hiking or backpacking. It's more just continuous movement. You're not taking the time to sleep or set up your tent, but all the same principles really do shine through. So I started going after some FKTs. I got the Arizona Trail, Colorado Trail, John Muir Trail, Long Trail, a number of them, and that's when I got into the Barkley marathons at that point. They just started today, if you know anything about those. So timely, but that I got into those, and then I got invited to do Cocodona 250 miler in 2021, and that was my first real big setup ultra. And I went into that, and I just kind of realized that it's a different world. The movement, what you're doing on the trail, super similar. But like at the start line, I showed up and I had this big duffel bag, and I was gonna like throw it in the truck where drop bags were going, and they asked where I wanted it to go. And I said, well, I thought it was going everywhere. I thought the drop bag was going to get hauled place to place and stuff like that. So it's all these intricacies, and I didn't have pacers or crew. I just didn't know the finer points of ultra running. but there were a lot of things that I was able to apply. So why does all of it matter? Why does the crossover matter? Well, in my own coaching and training as well, I think there's so much beyond just the act of running. And if you guys have done trail races, you know that frequently and periodically there's a lot of walking and hiking. So not only is there a mindset thing you can bring from backpacking or through hiking or being outdoors, but there's also the actual action of hiking up a hill rather than running it and blowing up the rest of your race. But then kind of beyond that, and the whole fact of mentioning how it takes a little bit longer to hike, I think that builds tremendous discipline and this ability to separate your mind from the process and what you're currently in versus the result. So you become very process oriented when you're on the trail, when you're hiking, when you're going out for a day hike to a lake. You get to the lake, you can, relax or something, but you're out there for the whole day. You don't have to worry about your moving time on Strava or something like that. And that's how it feels when you're in those longer ultras as well. When it's 2 a.m. and 100 miler or something, you don't really care how fast you're moving. You just care that you're moving at that point. So kind of I put in kind of 4 pillars to talk through pretty quickly, but the obvious one is speed. So I spent like 10 years not really doing too much speed work because I was just mostly walking for 10 to 14 hours a day. I had tremendous endurance, a huge base, but it was very developing of the slow twitch and efficiency at low speeds. But I never really worked on like turnover or tempo or anything. And that's kind of where this bridge and what I think is really interesting with how ultra running's going too, and how a lot of schedules and from the best to the people just getting into it is there's so much more incorporation of structured speed work and building on that. And that goes in conjunction with the longer, slower days too, which is really bridging that gap and kind of exactly how I've gotten to develop myself from being someone that walked all day, every day, into someone that has to have these key workouts that structure things too, because not only do those help your speed, just like in a mile time or a 50K or a marathon, but they also push up that VO2 max and running efficiency and running economy for literally anything you're doing up to FKTs. In the last couple of years of coaching some FKT athletes, it's been fascinating to use just a bit of a modified program, but fairly similar to a trail running program to coach. And it leads to very similar impressive results of being able to get FKTs by training that exact same thing. So that's something that I found really interesting of you can be very lopsided in one side or the other of maybe you grew up really fast playing soccer, sprinting everywhere, or maybe you just were really into hiking long distances, but developing the other side of that, just the gains are really, really fascinating, especially from the coaching side. I guess the biggest thing was like the combo of combining that speed too. It also led to like developing being faster, but also incorporating that same efficiency of being on the trail. So when you're hiking and something is in the back of your pack that you want to eat, you don't make that same mistake the next day because it's annoying. It's the same as if you're trail running, all your food is accessible. If you are going to get water or there's an aid station, you kind of know what you're getting. You got your bottles out ready to fill. And maybe you're taking a break at that aid station, but the key is to fill up your bottles, throw away your trash, and then you are done with your chores. That's always my motto with myself and athletes is like, get your chores done first. And even if you're taking a break, then you have nothing else on your mind. And that's kind of that thing with through hiking as well, is it's both that speed and leg speed and just that speed and efficiency too. The other thing that I think is huge, and I haven't thought about it until I was thinking about this actually, is that like pacing is almost exactly the same when you think about like an FKT or 100 miler, at least on the effort level, if you boil it down. So you're carrying, let's say 25 pounds on your back when you're doing an FKT or maybe a little more during a through hike. So your effort level, it's in high fat burning zone or something, but you're not blowing the doors off anything. You're not like sprinting a marathon or something, but also when you're doing a 100 miler, you just have a lighter pack, but you're not moving at a drastically different effort level because like a 24-hour 100 miler is a fantastic time. And that's 4 miles an hour. That's just slightly above hiking. So the crossover in pacing is probably one of the ones where someone looks at backpacking or through hiking versus ultra running and is like, well, that's the biggest difference. And I actually think that's the smallest pillar on the list where hiking can just aid in so much. And I do a lot of workouts where I have a pack on or have athletes do something because it's almost it's like weight training masquerading as like a fun day in the mountains type of thing too. You're working your muscles, you're not getting the pounding or the same exertion too. So I really love using the pacing side, at least on the effort level, a lot in that development too. And that's kind of been the biggest thing that's really helped for injury prevention for myself of just applying this huge base as well. I guess the downside though of the pacing coming from more of a hiking through hiking background is that like comfort pace where it's that pace you walk to the mailbox or whatever. I would do it for like 30 miles, not just like the walk to the mailbox. So my comfort pace got so ingrained that it's a little harder when, you know, you're feeling good, but you're just a little worried about running because for 10 years it was about more like self-preservation for the next 7 months versus getting through the next 5 to 25 hours depending on the event. So that's been the biggest mental hurdle of it's okay to push a little harder in a race because I don't have to get up and do this again tomorrow. Whereas most of my life, that's basically what the plan was for the foreseeable future. I'd be waking up and doing the exact same thing the next day. And so it's kind of the mental shift from self-sufficient to using the resources out there too, from aid stations to crew to pacers, all that. That's been one of the hardest things to accept and use. In fact, all my best race results, I think everything that I've won has been when I've driven out to a race, done it myself, no crew, no pacers, because it's like what I have or what's in my drop bag, I know will work and I don't have to worry or be concerned about someone else. And that's that side that's so ingrained when you're out there for months with only what's on your back. So it's just an interesting thing of letting go in an ultra, especially if there's crew or something. And when you get into that crewed spot, letting someone take care of you and or do all your chores for you, that is not something I've been very good at doing. So that's been a pretty interesting change in thing that I've noticed over the years as well. The third pillar I think is nutrition. So this is really one of the more unique ones because when you're out on a trail for months at a time, you're fueling for distance or well, you're fueling for like longevity of that distance. And then in an ultra, you're just fueling for a duration. So even if it's a 100 miler, you're fueling for a 24-hour thing. And then you can walk in a supermarket and get anything under the world that you want. But when you're out there for a long time, it's very calculated and you have to, like my mind thinks of calories as calories per ounce so that what I'm carrying packs the most punch when I'm out there on a FKT or a through hike or whatever, versus when you're fueling for a race, it's way more carb centric or what's going to work the best for your body to cover that distance versus what's the most complementary for your body to carry and consume over a distance. So it's just a really interesting way to think about it of the weight matters a lot less because you're probably only carrying that weight of that gel or whatever for 7 miles versus for like I've had resupplies that were 270 miles between them. So that compounds a lot when you're carrying an extra ounce or two. And I think the other thing that goes along with that is the very different nutritions, diets, and foods. It leads to a lot of different gut training as well. I think like a very well-rounded diet when I'm going for a record or something like that, where let's say it's a week long or like the John Muir Trail, that was 3 days. So I was very focused on what's going to be even sources of energy, less spikes and things, less carb centric because I'm really in different zones. So I would hone in on a lot of nuts because they're like calories per ounce are really high. things like that versus like I did a race 3 days ago out in Boise that was simply just to gut train with fuel that I would use for Cocodona. And it's a lot more liquid calorie based. It's a lot more easily consumables and things like that. So that's been a harder thing to adopt is like I could eat anything under the sun because I've gut trained for 15 years, but then adding in drinking a lot of calories and stuff has been something very unique too. And coming from it from this side of what is going to be the most efficient has made it interesting to just narrow down on what's the most efficient way to consume calories. And like 3 days ago, it was cooler than I was expecting in Boise. So I didn't drink as much, which meant I wasn't getting as many calories or as much sodium every single hour. So it was like, what's the problem solving mindset that I can go into to still hit the numbers I'm trying to hit? And that kind of leads right into the last thing, which is like the recovery, sleep, the intangibles of having a mindset that's extremely focused on like getting through an event or getting to the end versus just continuing on with something. So when you're out there on a 7 day carry between resupplies, you're just thinking, I have to correctly have my food portioned. I have to keep hydrating enough. I have to feel as good tomorrow as I do today for the most part. And you just adopt this very in the moment and problem solving mentality. Maybe in a dry stretch, I've done this before, you didn't get enough water and you're going to run out. So you don't jump immediately to, oh no, this is going to be awful, I'm probably going to have to quit this race, because that's not an option when you're out there. So this mindset of how do I solve this problem, or is there going to be a stream, or can I look at the map and find some other way to combat what's going on, has been the strongest thing that I've carried from casual backpacking to through hiking to records to ultra running. Is there's never a time when you can't figure it out. And so this is also what I preach a lot to athletes as well, is if something goes wrong, you just want to have a list of things in your head that you can try, even if some of them probably won't work, because the longer you have that hope that the next thing's going to work, then, you know, you have a little bit further that you can keep going. It's like, maybe I'll try this flavor gummy worm because my stomach doesn't feel good. Then I'll try liquid calories. And it's like, before you know it, you're that much closer to the end. And maybe you found a solution or maybe not, but you're closer to your end goal at the end of it. So that mindset thing has been probably the biggest thing I've taken forward, as well as the recovery side, which goes right along with that. When you do, I think I averaged about a 50K every day for 208 days on that Great Western Loop. And that's a lot of volume and bouncing back, and your body just gets used to that. And I think recovery goes right along with mindset. And I think Zach talked about how he had 2 big races back to back. And even that mindset of like, I did the goal and letting myself take a break or gear up for the next thing. It would be the same thing as getting into a town on a through hike of like, I am going to get a big meal tonight. I'm going to sleep in. I'm going to eat a bunch tomorrow. I'm going to resupply. But when it's recovery time, or when it's time to take care of something, it's time to take care of something versus the run streakers out there and stuff like that, which are, I think, just a totally different mindset than I have. It's like, when you're in a phase, you're kind of in the phase. When it's a 200 miles between resupplies and you're right in the middle of it, you just got to keep moving forward. But when you're in a town, it's time to take care of yourself. And I think the biggest thing, the intangible too, is a lot of races, especially trail races and stuff, they're in the wild. And even in Southern California, there's cougars, there's bears, there's all kinds of stuff. And night is scary for a lot of people. And the biggest thing I've taken on that front is I've spent about 3 years of my life living in a tent. And so I'm very comfortable with night. And even this past weekend, I did a little night running just to sharpen the skills and feel comfortable again. But that comfort in something that is unknown too is probably why we all run ultras, or interested in going up in distance too. But having experience to draw on of, I've already done things with tremendous unknowns and I can do them again. And whether it's just a few more miles or a few more days or whatever it may be. Drawing on that type of experience, I think, is really the biggest thing. Just like putting a pin in, these were the periods of discomfort in this race, and I'm going to draw on those during the next one because I was able to finish that one. And that's sort of how I treat both training trips, for like backpacking training trips, or going down to do like a tune-up race, or just really coming up with the schedule, is to build, to sharpen and bring some of those experiences back to the forefront, because I think they're really important. Like, you wouldn't jump from never having run up to 100 miler probably, but along the way you're building those little earmarked portions of your life or experiences that are like, that was really hard, but I did it, so I'm going to use that in the 50 mile. And you start looking back and it's like, they all kind of felt equally hard, because I think they are. Just maybe when you're doing 100 miler versus a 10 miler, you just might have 10 more of those experiences. I just don't think it ever gets exponentially harder. Just the number of times you have to deal with it when it's really hard are just increase over time. And so, yeah, those are the main kind of things that I've taken away. I think that the base has just been this huge blessing that I've had, and really has been something that I get to lean back into with like a longer weekend. So going into Cocodona, it's a 250 miler, putting in some big weeks, but I can lean back into some backpacking for the time on feet and treat it as more of the cross training thing too, because it just lessens that impact that running can have, especially road running as well. So I think I always like to think of it as tools in your toolkit. So that's like a cross training tool that I have that isn't going on an elliptical or riding a bike if I hate biking or something like that. It just low key has muscular strengthening properties, and it really applies directly to hills in an ultra. And it's one of the most easy crossovers for like a cross training activity. And so I would just really encourage you guys to find whatever that activity is where it doesn't feel like you're having a run workout or something that's so hard on that day that's kind of a rest day or an easy day or a cross training day, but that thing that is really enjoyable, because like some people love cycling or mountain biking too. But I think just using those things that you're passionate about and you would do no matter if every race disappeared or Strava didn't exist or whatever. I think that's kind of what it's all about too, is connecting that joy of what you want to do with your goals in the future, and then also the measurable ones of getting to those race results that you want to do. So it's just combining those skills, developing the weaknesses, and admitting that you have weaknesses, like mine is some of the speed workouts that people who ran in college had, and not too afraid to admit it, because I get to have a much bigger base than they do. So yeah, that's sort of the gist and some of the things I jotted down of the crossover between ultra running and through hiking, backpacking FKTs.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
when you train, say for a 100 miler compared to a through hike,
Mhm.
leading up to it, is your training plan or structure different?
It's gotten very similar. So it's a little bit different. I'm actually going to go for the Appalachian Trail record this year,
Mm.
but so probably about a month to a month and a half, 2 months out, it'll change. That's where they'll diverge. But fitness is fitness, and a lot anymore is really developing some of that running economy and VO2 max through speed workouts. And it doesn't feel like it should apply to something longer. But even if you push harder in like mile repeats or something, that's going to make the pace that you're even hiking up a hill, it's going to feel easier. It's going to make your pace faster. So I think it just really does correlate across the board. So it's similar. And then I like to put a ton of specificity in the 2 months or so leading into uh, a through hiker, an FKT type thing. But yeah, depending on the 100 miler, if it was flat and fast, it might be a little different. But yeah, they're pretty similar, I think, more than we admit. And that's kind of what I preach on the podcast and get guests on too. A lot of through hikers that are also ultra runners are the most fun, because they have this perspective of that kind of when you're in the moment of one of those things, you're just you're in the moment. You can't get up, you can't speed it forward, you can't slow it down. You just got to get through it.
Yeah, and guys are going so fast on this stuff now. It's like, you
Yeah.
have to be running some of it. So,
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's just using the terrain to your advantage, whatever it presents you.
yeah. So, well, we can open up to everybody if anyone has questions for Jeff. Like, let's
Yeah.
use them while we got them.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
Going through even the marathon, but especially the 50K, I don't know if it's just maybe a lack of volume that I had going into both of these preps, but I get it kind of with all. It's like a lot of like front hip flexor and like SI joint pain, I guess.
Hmm.
And I was thinking about it, especially on the 50K, because we were all running into this headwind. I'm like, yeah, this sucks for me right now, but we're all doing it.
Yep.
And so I'm like, I don't know. I'm sure everybody's got their different things, whether it's hip flexors, SI joints, that tension on the quads and hams, whatever it is. How do you just like push through it? Because I was telling myself leading up to it, I'm like, I don't care. I'm gonna like just push through that pain. And towards the end of that 50K, I'm like, screw it. I'm doing 4 1s right now because if I'm gonna, this hurts too bad. And then what did help was one of the guys that I was running with comes up behind me and we had kind of yo-yoed back and forth a few times and he comes up behind me, he's like, dude, let's just run the last 3 miles together. I'm like, okay, I'll try to keep up with you. And we ran into the finish line together. It was awesome. And we were both whining, complaining to each other. But I don't know. Do you have like a trick or
Yeah, I
just
think, well, number one, you're not alone. Hip issues or like hips getting tired in a race, probably the number one thing. I think running, yeah, it's just a repetitive motion and can tire out the hips. I mean, I'd say if you're gonna do one bit of strength training, it's for the hips. So I give
Mhm.
that a lot. But the other thing is, I think it's really where you're at of like, okay, there's this much left, and then chunking it up, even like you did. If at first it's like 4 1 mile chunks and you get through the first one and maybe there's a carrot of a little walking, totally cool. Because then maybe it's like, well, I feel a little better. Then it's like I can do 2 miles. So I think having fluid chunks is like a really good way to think about a race as well, especially near the end. Even if it's a really long race and you got 20 miles left, you can just be like, all right, 1 mile, and then I always like to think of it, then I'm in the teens. Or like if you got 11 miles left, or let's say 10, and then you get to 9.9, I always call it I'm in the nines. So you just
Mhm.
like are kind of tricking yourself that you have a little bit left.
Mhm.
And I think that, like, everyone's probably heard it with so much inspirational stuff out there too. It's like your mind really does want to just protect your body. So when things are hurting, it's like we got to stop because we got to be able to like hunt food and gather stuff and build a house for our family tomorrow. Like that's still the mentality that our brains are in. So if
Mhm.
there's a way to separate that and just make it think that it's a lot shorter, you can get through it, your body's going to make it through it. And maybe it's plus or minus some amount of recovery with how painful it is. And you can always, for the most part, tell an injury versus a true pain or just discomfort or whatever. But beyond that, it really is just finding those mental tools that chunk it up. I use a lot of like mottos or affirmations or mantras as well. And one of mine that I really like to use is like, it's supposed to hurt, or it's okay if
Mhm.
it hurts. And so what I always say is come up with something along those lines and then start using it in training. And I like to shift the words around too. Like maybe it's supposed to hurt. Maybe that frustrates me a little because I'll hate my former self for coming up with that. So you shift it around to it's okay if it hurts, like give yourself permission. But just little word tweaks like that and practicing those in your head through just a hard, maybe it's a 1 hour workout that's really hard. Practicing that just adds this depth of, okay, I've got hip discomfort, but now I got this tool of this mantra that I can use. And I knew it would hurt ahead of time. So I'm just reaffirming to myself right now that it's supposed to hurt and that's okay. And I just, after 1 mile, let's walk for a second, then we'll run the next one. So it's like kind of how I come up with it, and kind of just went over 3 tools that you just can use right
Yeah.
away right there.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. Any other questions?
Go ahead, Leo.
I was gonna say on your like when you actually doing your ultra runs, or what is your diet mainly consisted of during the ultra run itself? Is it
Y-
more like healthy style food, or is it fatty foods, or high carb intake?
Yeah, it's definitely not that healthy, probably from a dietitian's perspective. And I think it would be hard to make it too healthy because I don't think vegetables quite pack the punch. But
Right.
yeah, I would say it's so a few things. I definitely higher on the carb side. It depends on the duration of the event. So if it was, let's say, a 50K, it would be probably 99% at least carbs because that's you're in that carb burning zone. But say Cocodona 250, it'll be a healthy mix of carbs, especially early on, because be pushing it starts up a hill and in the desert, so that's fairly easily digestible. And then once it flattens out and my heart rate drops and in the fat burning zones, what I do is I actually have a protein shake every 5 or 6 hours out there on that type of thing. And I'll add more crackers, or I've had BLTs in the past, like hummus wraps, more real food that's the full spectrum of macros versus just focusing carbs or simple carbs that are just glucose and fructose and fleeting energy. That's why high carb fueling's the thing, because you burn through it so quick that the top runners that are talking about it take in like 100 plus grams of carbs an hour because they're burning it up that quick. And so something like fat, if you're doing something at a slower pace, that's just going to be more full energy that's going to last a little bit longer. It's harder to digest, which is why you can only use it when you're moving slower. But yeah, I think carbs, and kind of got to stick with at least a moderately high carb diet when you're moving fast and breathing hard. But when you're in that all day effort zone or just out there for multiple hours, or maybe it's an easy long run, totally support and use a lot of more fat based stuff myself. I've made sandwiches or wraps are really enjoyable. Burritos are pretty fun to pull out of your pack when you're hour 2 or 3 on an adventure out there. But I think that's the big thing is getting to explore that and try it on a training run or out there and just kind of see what works, because even in the high carb world, there's people extremely high carb, and then there's pro athletes right up there right next to them who are taking in about half the carbs that they are, just because nutrition, diet, and gut health is so variable from people to people that I think the biggest thing is finding what works and sticking to it, and maybe experiment or listen to what else is out there, but also not worry about it as well. And that kind of applies to training in general too. I think that it's easy to look at someone and think that's the next greatest thing because they're doing so well, but we all have our individual histories, body types, styles, injuries, all these things that really contribute to performance and nutrition, able to handle all that. So I think, yeah, that's what I do. And I'd say you could try it out on a run, but I don't think it works for everyone. And I don't know. Adding some fun food into your runs though does have a uplifting effect on you too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that race I just did, I ate a lot of fruits and stuff, and then I
Mhm.
used a gel that like Bucam was a gel I personally used. But they like on the 10-mile stations, they would have quesadillas or bacon, and I'm thinking fat right now, but just would not be good for me to digest running.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't want to try something new during your race as well.
I think a lot of times too, especially when we get into the longer races, like as your as the temperature changes and as your the intensity changes, like sometimes like the aid station just your body tells you what you want. And so even if you have like this like ironed out nutrition plan during training and then you go into an aid station like a quesadilla, like, oh man, that sounds so good right now. And then but like Zach and I did the Kodiak, I paced him to the end of the Kodiak 100 over the summer, and they had bacon at every aid station. It's like, dude, I cannot wait to get to another aid station.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and that's how the body's designed too. When it's like, obviously, probably we're craving salt, so it's
Mhm.
just like it tells you those things too.
Yeah.
And yeah, bacon is the wonder food.
Yeah, and then one of my go-tos is I especially when my wife is crewing me, that I make mashed potato burritos in advance, and just they're just awesome. You know, you get the salty, high carb stuff from the potatoes, but it's wrapped in a burrito so you can carry it and keep going at the same time. And I just
Yeah,
love them. So,
yeah, very filling too. I get the
mhm.
hiccups when I eat something that dense, actually.
And at
So
the end of the race, I did kill four pulled pork sandwiches.
That sounds great.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I got while through hiking, I actually got kicked out of an all-you-can-eat buffet in Virginia because I ate so much and was sitting there so long. They're like, you got to leave. The dinner rush is coming. It's like, wow, so much for all you can eat.
right. How about Vana, Anki? Anything for Jeff?
No, I think he has a great story. It's unbelievable. Like,
Thanks.
how do you hike for 7 months? That's insane.
Yeah, I was young. I was like 25 and just quit my job. But yeah, I mean that's really the cool thing of ultras too, is it can fill that adventurous spirit in a very manageable way to fit into your life. Because I don't know how I could ever get 7 months of
Mhm.
walking in my life again.
One of the things that Jeff didn't bring up is one of the pros about being a thru hiker is you get awesome trail names. So we don't get that in
Yeah,
ultra running. So if you don't know,
true.
Jeff's name is Legend. So and
Yep.
he got that before he was doing all the FKT stuff. So his,
Yeah. Yeah. We were camped outside Wrightwood, California, actually, and we left town and the key is you always want to leave town with something good to eat, like maybe buy a burrito and pack it out or buy pizza. And we left and we just had forgotten to do this. I think we got a ride so quick. And so I was 20 years old and wanting to impress the older group. So I was like, well, I'm going to hitchhike back to town and get us some pizzas and beer and stuff. And so that's what I did. And I showed up and they were like, wow, this is legendary. Your name should be Legend. And so just from getting pizza for a bunch of hungry hikers, that's how I got my trail name.
pretty good one too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
Did
well,
you met a lot of people on your 7 month hike, and are you still in contact with them?
yeah, yeah. I stay in contact with a lot of people from all the through hiking because it's very much like when you're running next to someone in a race is you can get to know them so well because you're just doing the most rudimentary things together of moving, eating, drinking, taking a break, having to go to the bathroom. Like you just get rid of all the superficial things when you meet someone. And it's that times 10 when you're out there through hiking with someone. So you just become friends so quickly.
That's literally my favorite part about hiking and
Yeah.
ultra running. I mean, I've
Yeah.
only done one, but I've met some great people out there in the trail, and it's amazing.
Yeah, the people are so fun. Yeah. From all different areas, all doing the same hard
mhm.
thing at the same time.
Yes, it is.
Well, we appreciate your time, Jeff. Thank you
Yeah,
so
thanks for
much.
having me.
Yeah,
This was good.
yeah,
Good questions too.
yeah. If there's any last minute before we sign off?
I don't know. Yeah. If you guys looking for a new podcast, free outside podcast, I
Yeah.
guess. I wrote a book too about some of these adventures if you're interested.
What's
So
Be
the
something to
book
listen
name?
to when I'm running, so I'm gonna check you
yeah,
out.
everything's called free outside. So FREE and then outside. So keep it all simple.
That's the book's name too?
Yep. Yeah.
It
All right.
shows how well they read my emails.
Yeah. Well, there's so many emails these days. You just skim them.
I just find the link, Eric.
Well, this is why they say you have to like hit someone a couple times before they remember anything about you. So they had to see if I was worth listening or hearing out or anything first.
Yeah, but but his podcast is like becoming one of my favorite podcasts. Just, and as we got more, as I was preparing for this and listening to more and more, it was like, man, like, why haven't I been like digging into this like deeper? It's like, because as I'm so like on the training aspect of it, like, it's just
Mhm.
like some of the stories that Jeff tells and the guests he has, like, is Nick Feller.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I was listening to the last one you had with him, and it's just like those are some amazing stories that he shares. So.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really fun, and just realized I knew a lot of people, and so about a year ago started a podcast, and it's been really fun. It's helped me learn to talk to people. I wouldn't be half as good tonight if I didn't practice a couple times a week.
Well, and I first found or heard of Jeff when he was doing the Cocodona, and it was when they were doing their live broadcast, and everybody was kind of like, "Oh, who's this through hiker guy? And how is he in the top 10?" And how like and no, he was kind of like in not part of the ultra running scene yet, and came in as this unknown like through hiker. Like, how's he going so fast? And then so it's like it was really neat just finding you that way. So.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was all about the efficiency. It's like
Mm.
everyone would mess around at aid stations. I'd just grab what I needed and keep mostly hiking by the end of that, and it worked out. There's a lot of
Yeah.
power in being good at walking.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when's Cocodona? It may,
May 5th, so
yeah.
about a month and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone keep an eye out for that. Be a live broadcast again. Mountain Post will be
Mountain Outpost. Yeah.
Mountain Outpost will be
Yep.
broadcasting live for like 5 days. So,
Yeah. So don't waste your whole time watching. Check in once in a while.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, all
Cool.
right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in.